We'd been married 4 years when I took the overnight shift at the Pump and Go on Route 11. That's a detail that matters, because people assume you take a job like that because you're alone, because you have nothing better, because your life has already bottomed out in some way that makes fluorescent lighting at 2 a.m. feel appropriate. But I had Mara. We had the duplex on Greenfield with the landlord who never fixed the gutters. We had the cat she'd found behind her dental office, the one missing half an ear. We had a life that was functioning, if not thriving, and the overnight shift was supposed to be temporary. 3 months, maybe 4, until Mara's student loans were under control and we could go back to both working days like normal people. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't some drifter. I wasn't broken. I was a married man working an overnight convenience store shift in Hellertown, Pennsylvania. And the first 6 weeks were exactly as boring as you'd expect. The store sat at the last exit before the highway opened into a long rural stretch toward Bethlehem. Gas pumps under a flat metal canopy. A parking lot that held maybe 12 cars, but never held more than 3. The building itself was a concrete rectangle, white tile floor, 5 aisles, a hot dog roller that I cleaned every morning at 5 a.m., a coffee station that I restocked at midnight and again at 4. Behind the counter, cigarettes, lottery tickets, a monitor showing 4 camera feeds in grayscale quadrants, front door, register area, aisle 3, parking lot. My shift ran 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Mara worked 7:30 to 4. We overlapped for about 3 hours in the evening. Dinner, television, the ordinary domestic rituals that keep a marriage from becoming a roommate arrangement. She was usually asleep by 9:30. I'd kiss her forehead, drive the 11 minutes to the store, and take over from Danny, who ran the evening shift and always left the coffee station a mess. For 6 weeks, the job was nothing. Truckers. Kids from Saucon Valley coming in for energy drinks after football practice ran late. A woman named Peggy who came in every single night at 11:15 for a pack of Pall Malls and a Snapple. Drunks occasionally, but never belligerent ones. Just soft, apologetic men buying corn chips and trying to seem more sober than they were. I read. I listened to podcasts. I cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. The boredom was physical. It lived in my lower back from standing, in my eyes from the lighting, in the strange, not quite silence of a refrigeration system running endlessly behind everything. Then around the 7th week, I started noticing the pattern. Every night, without exception, my last customer came in between 4:40 and 4:55 a.m. This isn't unusual by itself. Plenty of people are awake at that hour, heading to early shifts, coming off late ones. But it was always a single person, always alone, always buying something small, a bottle of water, a pack of gum, a single banana from the sad little fruit basket I kept near the register. They'd pay, always cash, always exact change or close to it, and leave. And then no one else would come in until my relief showed up or until after 6. I noticed because the consistency was almost mechanical. Not the same person, never the same face twice, but the timing, the solitariness, the smallness of the purchase. It became something I anticipated, a ritual marking the last hour of my shift. I started thinking of them collectively as the closer. Not because they closed anything, but because, after them, the night was over. The store would enter a dead pocket of silence that lasted until dawn broke fully and the morning commuters appeared. This is all still normal. This is all still just a man alone for 8 hours finding patterns in randomness because human brains need patterns or they start to rot. What was not normal? What I didn't notice for another 2 weeks because I had no reason to check was that the closer never appeared on camera. I found this out by accident. We'd had a registered discrepancy. Nothing serious, about $7 over 2 weeks, and my district manager, a guy named Howell, who wore khakis so aggressively pressed they looked like weapons, asked me to review the footage from the nights in question to see if I'd missed ringing something up. The system kept 72 hours of footage on a local drive before overwriting. I sat in the back office, which was a closet with a folding chair and an ancient PC, and I scrubbed through the feeds, found the discrepancy easily enough. I double-scanned a Red Bull for a trucker, and then voided it, but the void hadn't processed. Simple, fixable. But while I was in there, fast-forwarding through the dead hours, I noticed something. At 4:47 a.m. on the first night I reviewed, the front door opened. On camera, I could see it swing inward, the pneumatic arm catching it. I could see the motion sensor trigger. The little counter we kept above the frame ticked up by 1, but no one walked through. The door opened, the counter ticked, the door closed, and then, at the register cam, I saw myself look up, smile slightly, say something. My mouth moved and ring up a transaction. I watched myself take cash from the air, make change into nothing, say something else, have a good one maybe, or drive safe, something I would say, and then look back down at my book. I sat in that closet for a long time. I checked the second night. Same thing, 4:52 m. Door opens. No one enters. Counter ticks. I interact with empty space for 45 seconds. Transaction completes. Door opens. No one leaves. The third night. The fourth. I went back to the beginning of the 72-hour window and checked every single closer transaction. 7 nights. 7 door opens without a person. 7 interactions between me and nothing. But I remembered them, each one. The woman with the braids buying peppermint gum, the older guy in the Carhartt jacket who paid for a coffee with a 5 and told me to keep the change. The kid, maybe 19, who bought a bag of peanuts and seemed like he'd been crying. I remembered their faces, their hands, the sounds they made, setting items on the counter. I could have described them to a sketch artist. I closed the footage, wrote up the discrepancy explanation for Howell, and drove home in a state I can only describe as aggressive neutrality. I was not going to be disturbed by this. There was an explanation. Camera malfunction, angle issue. Some codec problem with the recording that dropped frames or failed to render certain conditions. I'd worked in IT support briefly after college. I knew that video systems were fragile, that compression artifacts could swallow data, that the absence of evidence was not the evidence of absence. Mara was awake when I got home. She had the day off. Some continuing education thing had been canceled, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, still in her pajamas, the cat on her lap. "You look weird," she said. "Long night." It's always a long night. This one was longer. She watched me for a moment with that expression she had, not suspicious exactly, but perceptive in a way that made me want to either tell her everything or tell her nothing. I chose nothing, kissed her, went to bed, slept badly, but I slept. The next night I was hyper-aware. Every customer who came in after midnight I studied. The cameras were live on my monitor, behind the counter. I could watch in real time. everyone appeared. The drunk guy at 1:30 buying Funyuns. There he was, all 4 feeds capturing him perfectly. The nurse in scrubs who came in at 3:15 for a coffee. Clear as day on every angle. Then 4:44, the door opened. The motion counter ticked, and a man walked in. I saw him. Medium height. Thin jacket, dark blue, baseball cap, no logo. He walked to aisle 2, picked up a bottle of water, the Deer Park, not the store brand, and brought it to the counter. I rang it up. $1.79. He gave me 2 ones. I gave him 21 cents, he said. Thanks in a voice that was perfectly ordinary. He left. I looked at the monitor. The door had opened and closed. The counter had ticked. The aisle 2 camera showed the water bottle lifting off the shelf and floating to the end of the aisle at waist height, then disappearing from frame. The register camera showed me making change into open air. The parking lot camera showed no car arriving and none leaving, and I realized, with a calm that frightened me more than anything else, that I wasn't scared of the man. I was scared of the footage, because in person, in real time, there had been nothing wrong. A man bought a water. It was the most ordinary interaction imaginable. The wrongness existed only in the record, only in the version that wasn't me. I didn't tell Mara. That's the decision I want to examine, because it's the one that started costing us. Not telling her wasn't about protecting her. It was about protecting the version of myself that she was married to, the rational one, the one who handled things, the one who didn't come home from a gas station job with ghost stories. We'd built our relationship on being practical people. We didn't believe in things. We believed in budgets and timelines and the concrete steps between where we were and where we wanted to be. Telling her would have meant becoming someone she'd have to worry about. And she already worried about the shift itself. About me being alone in a glass box off the highway all night. About robberies. About the slow psychological toll of inverted sleep. So I said nothing, and the closers kept coming every night, without fail. Between 4:40 and 4:55, always one person, always alone, always a small purchase, always paying cash, always perfectly normal in person and perfectly absent on film. I started studying them more carefully. Not their faces. I'd already determined those were unremarkable, unfamiliar, never repeating, but their behavior, the way they moved through the store, whether they hesitated, whether they looked at the cameras, whether anything about their physical presence felt wrong in a way I might be filtering out. Nothing. They were flawless, indistinguishable from any other customer, except in their consistent absence from the recording. After 2 weeks of this, 2 weeks of watching every night, confirming every morning, saying nothing, I started experimenting. The first thing I tried was speaking to them about the camera, directly. The closer that night was a woman, maybe mid-30s, buying a pack of tissues. As I rang her up, I said, "Hey, weird question. Do you mind if I take your picture? We're doing a customer appreciation thing." She looked at me, smiled. "Sure," she said. I held up my phone, opened the camera app, took the photo. When I looked at the screen, I was looking at an empty store. The counter was there. My hand was there holding the phone up. The tissue box sat on the counter in front of nobody, but she was standing right there. I could see her with my eyes while the phone showed me she didn't exist. "Did it come out okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Great, thanks." She took her tissues and left. The bell above the door chimed when she pushed it open. I watched through the window as she walked across the parking lot and simply, I don't have a better word for this, wasn't there anymore. Not vanished, not faded. I looked down at the register to close the transaction, and when I looked back up, the parking lot was empty, and I could not pinpoint the moment of transition. My hands were shaking, not dramatically, just a fine tremor that I noticed when I tried to write in my incident log, and my handwriting came out jagged. I put the pen down, pressed my palms flat on the counter. The refrigeration hummed. The fluorescent tube above aisle 4 flickered the way it always did, a rhythm I'd memorized without meaning to. The next night, I tried something different. When the closer came in, a tall man, heavy set, buying a pack of Wrigley's spearmint, I engaged him in extended conversation. Cold out there tonight? Getting there, he said. Supposed to freeze by morning. You heading to work? Yeah, warehouse over on Industrial. Which one? My buddy works at the Granger Distribution Center. He paused, just a fraction of a second. Not long enough to be suspicious if I hadn't been looking for it. That's the one, he said. What's your name? Maybe you know him. Dave Keller? Another pause. Same length, like a search being conducted somewhere far away. Don't think so, the man said. Big place, though. Yeah, big place. He took his gum. He left. I watched him cross the parking lot on the live monitor, absent, of course. But the door opened and closed, and I sat with the knowledge that I had just had a conversation with something that knew what the Granger Distribution Center was, but did not know anyone who worked there. Something that could generate plausible answers to social questions with only a hair's breadth delay. Something that was performing the role of customer so accurately that without the camera evidence, I would never, not once, have questioned it. And here's what started eating at me. What I turned over during the long hours between midnight and the closer's arrival. If I hadn't checked the footage, would any of this matter? If the camera simply didn't exist, would there be any horror here at all? The interactions were pleasant. They were brief and transactional and utterly normal. No one had threatened me. No one had behaved strangely. Nothing about the clockers was wrong except their relationship to recorded light. I started to wonder what that meant about what they were. Not ghosts. Ghosts imply death, imply a person who existed before. These felt more like performances, accurate ones. Something wearing the concept of customer so perfectly that only a mechanical eye could see through it. 3 weeks in, Mara noticed something was wrong. Not because I told her, because of the sleep. I was sleeping less and worse. I'd lie next to her after my shift and stare at the ceiling and think about the closers and what they wanted and whether wanting was even the right framework, and she'd wake up at 7:30 to find me still open-eyed, and she'd say my name in a voice that was concerned in a way that made me feel guilty. You need to quit that job, she said one morning. Flat. Not an argument, not a request. A clinical assessment. We need the money. We need you sleeping. I'll adjust. It takes time. Some people take months to flip their schedule. It's been 2 months, almost 3. These things take time. She stood in the bathroom doorway, holding her toothbrush and looking at me like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't balance. I could feel her wanting to push, wanting to ask the real question. Not are you sleeping, but what happened to you? And I could feel myself walling off the answer with a certainty that felt less like decision and more like compulsion. I'm fine, I said. Really. It's just the schedule. She didn't believe me. So she let it go, because that's what we did. We let things go and trusted they'd resolve. It was one of the things I loved about us, the lack of drama, the patience. It had always felt like maturity. Now it was starting to feel like a gap. I was hiding something inside. The 4th week of the closers, I tried not looking. I set an alarm for 4:35. When it went off, I went into the back room, the closet office with the PC and the folding chair, and I sat there. I didn't watch the monitor. I didn't go to the counter. I just sat. At 4:48, the door chime sounded. I stayed in the back, 30 seconds, a minute, the sound of footsteps on tile. Measured, unhurried, the soft thud of something being placed on the counter, then silence. Then the footsteps again, retreating, the door chime, silence. I came out. On the counter sat a bag of peanut M&Ms, and beside it, $1.50 in exact change. A dollar bill and 2 quarters, placed neatly beside the bag. They'd served themselves, paid correctly, left. I checked the camera. The footage showed the M&Ms lifting off the shelf in aisle 1, floating at hip height to the counter, and setting themselves down. The money appeared on the counter, didn't fall, didn't slide from a hand. It simply was not there in one frame and was there in the next. Then the bag left the counter and moved toward the door, which opened on its own, and that was that. I stood behind the register for a long time, looking at the money. It was real money. I could feel the paper grain of the bill, the cold metal of the quarters. I put it in the register. The transaction balanced. That was the night I realized they didn't need me. Whatever ritual this was, whatever function the closers served, my participation was optional. They would come whether I was at the counter or not. They would purchase something, pay correctly, and leave. The store facilitated something, and I was incidental to it. This should have been a relief. It wasn't. Because if they didn't need me, then the 6 weeks of normal interaction, the smiles, the small talk, the have a good ones and the drive safes, those weren't functional requirements of the transaction. They were something else. Something performed for a reason I couldn't identify, directed at me specifically for a purpose that had nothing to do with the purchase. They were talking to me because they wanted to talk to me, or because something wanted them to talk to me. I started deteriorating. I can use that word honestly because Mara used it first, and Shui was right. The sleep deprivation compounded. I lost weight, 7 pounds in 2 weeks, because my appetite had restructured itself around the shift, and I was eating one real meal at dinner and nothing else. My focus degraded. I became irritable in ways I'd never been, snapping at Mara over nothing. The dishes, the cat's litter box, the sound of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. We started fighting, not screaming. We'd never been screamers, but the cold, precise kind of fighting that happens between people who are good with words and tired of each other's evasions. She knew I was keeping something from her. I knew she knew. And the knowledge sat between us like a piece of furniture neither of us would have acknowledged. And we navigated around it. And the navigating made the house smaller every day. "Talk to me," she said one night before I left for the shift, standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, still in her work clothes because she'd waited up. "About what? About whatever is making you like this." "Like what?" "Absent, even when you're here, especially when you're here." "I'm tired, Mara." "You're not tired. Tired people sleep when they get the chance." You lie there with your eyes open for 3 hours and then get up and sit in the living room in the dark. That's not tired? She was right. I knew she was right. And I almost told her then. Almost described the closers, the camera, the emptiness where people should be. But something stopped me. Not fear, exactly. Something more like the conviction that telling her would make it worse. Not for her, for the phenomenon itself. As though speaking about it outside the store would constitute an invitation for it to exist outside the store. And right now, the store was the only place where it lived. I just need to get through the next few weeks, I said. I'll talk to Howell about moving to days. You said that last month. I mean it this time. She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded once, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed without saying goodnight. I drove to the store with the feeling that I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. By the 5th week, I had started anticipating the closers with something I'm ashamed to call eagerness, not enjoyment. Nothing about this was enjoyable, but the long hours between midnight and 4:40 had become unbearable in a way they hadn't been before. The boredom was no longer neutral. It was weighted. It pressed down on me with the knowledge of what was coming, and the waiting became the worst part. And when the closer finally arrived, when the door opened and the person walked in and said something normal and bought something small, I felt relief. The way you feel relief when the dentist finally starts drilling after you've been sitting in the chair for an hour. And the conversations were getting longer. Not dramatically. An extra sentence here. A follow-up question there. The closer who bought the banana asked me how my night was going. The one who bought the lighter asked if I'd been working here long. The one who bought the bottled water told me the sunrise was going to be beautiful. Real orange one, I think. And I'd looked out the window after she left, and she was right. They were learning me. That's how it felt. Not studying, not interrogating, but slowly, over nights, building a conversational intimacy that I hadn't consented to and couldn't stop participating in. Because how do you refuse to answer, "How's your night going?" How do you not respond when someone tells you the sunrise will be beautiful? The social contract is too deep. The reflexes are too strong. I started dreading my days off. This is the part that Mara noticed and that I couldn't explain. I had 2 days off per week, Monday and Thursday, and on those nights I didn't sleep, not from insomnia, from agitation. I'd lie in bed next to my wife and think about the store and wonder who was closing and whether the closer came in on my nights off and whether Danny or the weekend guy was talking to them and whether they were talking back and what they were saying. The jealousy was irrational, and I knew it was irrational, and I couldn't make it stop. On a Tuesday morning, after a shift where the closer, a young woman with short hair and paint-stained jeans, had asked me my name, and I'd told her, and she'd said, "Nice to meet you, Aaron," with such warmth that I'd felt my chest constrict. I came home and found Mara at the kitchen table again. "I called Dr. Reeves," she said. Reeves was our GP. "I made you an appointment for Thursday." "For what? For whatever this is. You've lost weight. You're not sleeping. You're distracted all the time. I'm worried about you." "I don't need a doctor." "Then tell me what you need." The silence lasted too long. I could feel the conversation forking. One path where I told her everything, sat down at the table, showed her the phone photo of the empty store, described the floating M&Ms and the self-paying customers and the warmth in a stranger's voice saying my name, and another path where I said nothing and let the gap between us widen by another increment. "I'll go to the appointment," she nodded. "Thank you." That Thursday, I sat in Dr. Reeves' office and told him I was having trouble sleeping due to shift work. He prescribed melatonin and suggested a light therapy lamp. I sat in his waiting room afterward, feeling like a liar and a coward, and also obscurely victorious, as though I'd protected something precious from clinical examination. I went back to work Friday night. The closer came at 4:41, an older man, maybe 65, gray stubble, flannel shirt. He bought a package of those small powdered donuts, the 6-pack in the plastic clamshell. While I rang him up, he said, "Your wife seems nice." I stopped. My hand was on the register. The total was $2.49, and he was holding 3 ones, and I had not taken them yet. "What?" I said. "I said your wife seems nice. Mara, right?" I did not respond. I did not take the money. I looked at this man, this thing shaped like a man, this absence wearing a flannel shirt. And for the first time in all the weeks I was afraid. Not of what he was, but of what he knew. How close the phenomenon had gotten while I thought it was contained to this building, to this register, to the hours between 4:40 and 4:55. "How do you know her name?" My voice was even. I'm proud of that in retrospect. He tilted his head. "Just slightly, like a dog hearing a frequency. You told me," he said. "I didn't. Last week. We talked about your schedule. You mentioned her." I searched my memory. The closers blurred together. Faces I'd never see again. Conversations I could barely distinguish. Had I mentioned Mara? I talked to them. They asked me things. I answered on reflex. I couldn't be certain I hadn't said her name at some point in the accumulating weeks. "Right," I said. "Right, sorry. Long night." He smiled. Set the $3 on the counter. Took his donuts. Left. I watched the parking lot through the window, empty. I looked at the monitor. The donuts had floated off the shelf and across the store, and the money appeared on the counter from nowhere, and the donuts left the building by themselves. The door opened and closed for no one. I drove home at 6. Mara was still asleep. I stood in the bedroom doorway and watched, breathe, and felt something I can only describe as territorial. Not romantic, not loving, but the animal sense of a perimeter being tested by something outside it. I started thinking about quitting. The thought came in stages. First as a fantasy, just not going in, just telling Howell I was done, just letting the overnight shift be someone else's problem. Then, as a plan, I'd give 2 weeks' notice. Mar and I would tighten our budget. It would be fine. Then, as an urgent necessity, I needed to stop going there. I needed to stop talking to them. I needed to close the channel through which they were learning the shape of my life. But every time I moved toward the decision, something intervened. Not supernaturally. Practically, our car needed brakes. Mara's student loan minimum went up. The landlord raised our rent by $75. Each time I thought I'd found the financial margin to quit, the margin evaporated, and the store remained the only answer, and I stayed. I don't think they caused these things. I want to be clear about that. I don't believe the closers made my car need brakes, but the timing, the persistent, suffocating precision of the timing, made it feel like the universe was conspiring to keep me exactly where I was, standing behind that counter, available 5 nights a week, until whatever they were doing was done. 6 weeks in, 7, 8. The conversations with the closers had become the most intimate exchanges in my life. I don't know how to explain that without sounding insane, but it's true. They asked me things no one else asked. Not probing things, gentle things. How I was feeling, whether I'd eaten, whether the drive home was peaceful at that hour. They noticed when I looked tired. They noticed when I'd gotten a haircut. One of them, a woman my mother's age, said, "You seem lighter tonight," on a night when I'd actually had a good evening with Mara, and she was right. And the fact that she noticed made me feel seen in a way that I wasn't being seen at home anymore. Because at home I'd built so many walls that Mara couldn't reach me, even when she tried. And Mara was still trying. That's important. She hadn't given up. She was still asking, still pushing, still sitting at the kitchen table, with her arms crossed asking me to talk to her. But every conversation was the same. Me deflecting, her frustrated, both of us retreating to separate rooms, to be alone with our respective forms of incomprehension. The marriage was degrading not because of conflict, but because of asymmetry. She was living in a world where her husband was slipping away for no visible reason. I was living in a world where the only people who could see me clearly weren't people at all. On a Tuesday night in late November, the closer was a man about my age. Jeans, sneakers, a hooded sweatshirt. He bought a Gatorade, the blue one. While I rang it up, he said, "You don't have to keep doing this, you know." I looked at him. "The job," he said. "If it's wearing you out, there are other jobs. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like you haven't slept in a month." Comes with the territory. He paid, took his Gatorade. At the door he paused and looked back at me. "She's going to leave if you don't fix this," he said. "You know that, right?" Then he walked out. The door chimed. The parking lot remained empty in every way that could be documented. I stood behind the counter and felt the words land in me like a stone in a well, not because they were threatening, because they were caring, because the thing that had said them, the invisible, unrecordable thing, had looked at me with genuine human concern and told me a truth about my marriage that I was too close to see clearly. And it was right. I knew it was right the way you know something in your body before your mind formulates the thought. Mara was going to leave. I cried at the register, not sobbing, just a quiet leak from both eyes that I wiped with my sleeve before the morning trucker came in for his coffee. I cleaned the hot dog roller. I restocked the cup lids. I finished my shift. I drove home. Mara was awake, sitting at the table. Coffee, no cat this time. Her face had a settled quality to it. A decision made, a script prepared. "We need to talk," she said. I sat down across from her and said, I know we do." And then I told her, not all of it, not the closers, but I told her I was struggling, that the shift was doing something to my head, that I'd been keeping the extent of it from her because I was ashamed of not being able to handle a simple job, that I was scared of what I was becoming. Isolated, secretive, unable to be present even when I was physically here. She cried. I hadn't seen her cry since her father's surgery 2 years ago. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she said. "Why do you think you have to carry everything alone?" "I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know." She came around the table and held me, and I held her. And for 15 minutes the world was only us and the kitchen, and the sound of the cat scratching at the bedroom door. I felt rescued. I felt returned to myself. I gave my 2 weeks' notice the next day. Howell tried to talk me out of it. The overnight was hard to fill. He offered a raise, 50 cents. I said no. He offered to move me to a split shift. Evenings plus 1 overnight. I said no. I was done. I was choosing my wife over the store, over the closers, over whatever had been studying me through the disguise of commerce. I was choosing daylight. My last 2 weeks at the Pump and Go were the worst. The closers came every night, as usual, but the conversations had changed. There was a tone to them now, not menacing, not angry, but something like disappointment, something like loss. The woman who bought the mints said, "We'll miss you." The man who bought the newspaper said, "It won't be the same." The teenager who bought the energy drink looked at me with what I can only describe as abandonment, and I felt guilty. That's the insane part. I felt guilty for leaving, as if I owed them something, as if the weeks of conversation had created an obligation I was now defaulting on. I'd lie in bed next to Mara, sleeping better now, eating better, our conversations thawing, and feel a pull toward the store that was not desire but duty. The feeling you get when you know someone's expecting you and you don't show up. My last shift was a Friday, December 7th. Cold enough that my breath showed in the parking lot when I arrived. Danny did the handoff as usual. Register counted, coffee made, floor mopped badly. I locked the door behind him and stood alone in the store for what I told myself was the last time. The hours passed, the usual trickle. Peggy with her Pall Malls, she said she'd miss me, and she was real. She appeared on every camera perfectly. The nurse in scrubs, a trucker who told me about his daughter's Christmas play. Normal people, real people. I savored them in a way I never had before. The weight of them on camera, the beautiful mundanity of their existence in every medium simultaneously. 4:40 arrived. 4:45, 4:50. At 4:53, the door opened. It wasn't one person. There were 5 of them, all at once, walking in together like a group of friends, stopping for road trip supplies. 2 women, 3 men, various as ages. They spread through the store, and I watched them on the monitor, and they weren't there. 5 separate absences moving through the aisles, picking up items, chips, soda, a pack of gum, a candy bar, a map. We still sold maps. They converged at the counter. I rang them up one by one. My hands were steady. I don't know why. The last one, a woman, maybe 40, wearing a green scarf, placed her item on the counter. It was a postcard. We sold them near the register, local landmarks, mostly. She'd chosen the one of the covered bridge on Creek Road. "For you," she said, sliding it across the counter. "So you remember." "Remember what?" She smiled. It was a real smile, warm, the kind a friend gives you when they know something about you that you haven't figured out yet. "That we were here," she said. "They left, all 5. The door opened once, and they went through it together, and the parking lot was empty, and the monitor showed nothing, and the motion counter ticked up by 5, and I was alone in the store with a postcard and a register full of their money. I picked up the postcard, the covered bridge. I turned it over. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, neat, small, slightly old-fashioned, were 2 words. "Thank you." I finished my shift. Cleaned the hot dog roller for the last time. Restocked the cups. Counted the register. Left the postcard in my jacket pocket. Drove home. That was 5 months ago. I work days now. Not retail. A warehouse job. Nothing glamorous, but the hours are right, and Mara and I eat dinner together every night, and we're relearning each other the way you relearn a language you once spoke fluently. Things are better, not perfect. The gap I created is still closing, slowly, and trust, once interrupted, doesn't resume at full speed, but better, measurably, genuinely. But here's what I can't resolve. Here's what sits in me at 4:45 every morning when I wake up. And I do wake up every morning at exactly 4:45, regardless of when I went to sleep. I keep the postcard in my nightstand drawer. Mara has never seen it. Some mornings, when I wake at 4:45 and lie there in the dark listening to her, breathe, I open the drawer and take it out and look at it. The covered bridge, the handwriting. Thank you, but last week, and this is what I can't explain, what I can't make sit right in my mind. Last week I looked at the postcard and the handwriting had changed. Not the words, the same 2 words, but the handwriting was different. Smaller, more cramped, and beneath the thank you, in the same new hand, there was an addition. We found someone new, but we think about you. I put it back in the drawer. I haven't looked at it since. I want to say I won't look again. I want to say the store is behind me, that the closers are someone else's problem now, that whatever they are, whatever patient, invisible, unrecordable thing they constitute, they've moved on and I'm free. But I wake up at 4:45 every morning, and some mornings, before the sun comes up, before Mara stirs, I lie in the dark and I miss them. I miss being seen by them. I miss the warmth of being known by something that chose me specifically and gently and without harm. I miss the way the woman in the green scarf smiled at me. I miss the feeling of being someone's last stop. And I'm afraid, not of them, never of them, but of the morning when I wake at 4:45 and Mara is still asleep and I open the drawer and the postcard says something new, something like an address, something like an invitation, something like we're closer now because I know, with a certainty that lives in my body like a second heartbeat, that I will go wherever it tells me, and I'm afraid that whatever I am when I arrive, I won't appear on camera either.